Welcome once again to Lehto's Law. Here's Steve Lehto.
I've done more than a few videos on Carvana, and lately they've been having financial issues, shall we say. But closer to home, here in Michigan where I'm located, they've had trouble with the state of Michigan. If you are a B dealer and you sell used cars, there are rules about how fast you've got to do your paperwork and get your paperwork to the state of Michigan so the car buyer can get their registration and their title, for instance. And so they've had issues with that in the past, and they were actually fighting this out in court. And now the headline from the Detroit Free Press, the paper I delivered as a young man, Jamie LaRoe wrote the story, Carvana and Michigan reach deal that leaves used car megastore without license in state. So the used car megastore Carvana said Wednesday it is back to business as usual in Michigan, but state officials say it's not quite that clear because their Novi location is no longer a licensed dealership. The dealership that was in Novi is no longer licensed to sell cars. Now, Michigan car buyers can make a purchase with Carvana online, and they can get a car. But Carvana and the state reached a settlement as part of an ongoing dispute over the state's assertion that Carvana committed violations of Michigan's Motor Vehicle Code, MCL 257, etc. And Carvana apparently, in this process, admitted to violating the code. In early October, state officials suspended the license of the Carvana dealership in Novi for imminent harm to the public, a claim that Carvana said was baseless. The state said that Carvana, LLC, which is owned and operated and located off of Novi Road near I-96, committed several violations centering on untimely delivery of titles after vehicle sales. The alleged violations were discovered during an investigation by the state regulatory staff of multiple complaints from consumers about title problems with their vehicles. And so on Wednesday, Carvana's senior associate general counsel told the Free Press exclusively that Carvana agreed to voluntarily hand in its in-state Michigan dealer license for a period of 3 years, after which they can apply for it again. The Michigan Department of State confirmed the settlement with Carvana and provided the signed agreement to the Free Press. To save taxpayer dollars that would go to court fees, it is standard practice for our department to offer plea deals to dealerships that violate the law and are likely to have their licenses revoked, says the Chief External Affairs Officer for the Secretary of State. In a plea deal signed with our department, the Carvana dealership in Novi agreed it had violated the law and to have its dealer license revoked and to be barred from reapplying for a new license for 3 years. Carvana said settling the matter allows both sides to move forward and for the company to continue to serve Michigan's car buyers, this time with new practices in place to assure compliance with Michigan law. I view this as a positive. I recognize that we were late, we weren't perfect, and the state was frustrated at us. We see this as a pretty small bucket of people, but it's important to them, and we have to get it right. Our performance today is really, really good, so I hope this is closing that chapter. Carvana's sales in Michigan make up about 2 to 3% of the company's total U.S. sales. Carvana has not released its total sales for last year, but in 2021 it sold about 425,000 cars across the U.S. Olson said the settlement doesn't change much for Michigan car buyers who could still buy a car from Carvana online and have it delivered to them, even during the state's suspension due to Michigan law allowing e-commerce activity. As part of the settlement, Michigan consumers can still buy a used vehicle from Carvana online and either take delivery of it at Carvana's vending machine in Novi, or Carvana will deliver it to their home. Question, of course, is who is doing the transaction if you're still going to dealership to pick up the car? Well, Carvana is based in Arizona, and they told the state regulators they would use their Arizona selling license and process to conduct business in Michigan, which means that Michigan customers will get temporary plates and paperwork from Arizona after their purchase. They can then switch over to Michigan with the Secretary of State somewhere down the road. So even though you could take delivery of it here in Michigan, the transaction is, in essence, you buying the car from a dealership in Arizona. It is a preferred method of operating, Olson said, because it saves time and money with efficient systems that already exist in Arizona. We offer Arizona-based program in 18 states, so we know how to do that paperwork well. So we're happy to do this model. It's our baseline. I'm curious to know, though, if the time frames are different in Arizona, because in Michigan, the dealer has so many days, and it's not that many, but they've got a little bit of time, but they must submit the paperwork to the state. And that's the title application and all the documents indicating regarding sales taxes and so on that go to the state, and then the state processes it, issues a title and a registration to the owner, the person who bought the car. And I've mentioned before, the reason that states are often so nitpicky about this is they want to make sure they get their sales tax. So in the old days, dealerships would routinely sell a car and make a mental note to pay the taxes later. And then they'd file the paperwork whenever they felt like it. And later on, they might go, oh, gee, we don't have the money for the taxes. How'd that happen? So the state doesn't want that to ever occur. Meanwhile, they confirmed that Michigan residents can continue to do business with Carvana online, but will need to retitle the vehicles they buy to Michigan. So you're in essence going to be buying the vehicle in Arizona, getting the paperwork, and then having to retitle it here in Michigan. He said, we continue to protect Michiganders by enforcing the law with car dealerships across the state and revoking the licenses of any dealer that fails to comply with the law. As part of the settlement, Carvana has also agreed to pay a $10,000 fine to cover the cost of the state's investigation, the settlement document said, and the attorney confirmed. So they're agreeing to pay a $10,000 fine and surrender their license. The settlement will put an end to Carvana's lawsuit that they had filed against the state, and they'd also sought an injunction with the Michigan Court of Claims asking for an immediate stop to the state's suspension. But on October 20th, the Michigan Court of Claims judge denied that request for the temporary restraining order against the state. The settlement not only provides both parties with certainty and clarity, but it avoids future legal hearings. The attorney says this was something both parties could live with and move forward on how to operate in the state. I've mentioned before, I've got friends who own car dealerships. B dealers, which is a used car dealer, and also brokers who broker cars for other people. And the paperwork is a pain, okay? I'm the first to admit that. It is a difficult job. And believe it or not, there are people out there you can hire or who will consult with you on how to get the paperwork done. You can even go online to the Secretary of State's office in Michigan and look up a thing called the dealer manual. And the dealer manual is a PDF that you can print off. It's free. The Secretary of State's office put it together years ago as a guide for people who want to be car dealers. And I actually have known somebody, and I asked him, how'd you get into this? I know somebody who just started a car dealer. And he goes, I went and downloaded the dealer manual and I read it. And I paid particular attention to what was in there, checklists, and I did it, and now I'm selling cars. It's not that hard, but it is just a bunch of stuff you got to do. And so applications for title and so on, yeah, it's a lot of paperwork. But if you're doing the same paperwork over and over and over again, it gets easier. And so, if you've bought a car, you know what I'm talking about. There's a pile of paperwork that you got to sign, right? And a lot of it is mandated by law. But if you're the dealership and this is all you do all day long, you should get good at it. And by the way, most dealerships I know of that are successful and been around for a few years usually have people on the staff, that's all they do is paperwork. Now, I know that some people say, Steve, the fact that the government makes it to where you've got to have somebody on staff who can do paperwork for the government, that's a little bit too much. Well, if you think about it this way, though, a couple things. One is, look at how much sales tax the state gets when the paperwork is done properly. If it's not done properly, then how do we know the state's getting their money? Number two, you buy a car. You pay for the car, you drive the car home, it's got temporary plates, and you haven't got the title yet. How long do you wait before you start panicking, going, where's my title? What do you do when your temporary plate expires, your temporary tag expires? And these are things that people were encountering. Now, it's true that people were encountering some of these things during COVID because COVID caused all kinds of problems. But COVID was a couple of years ago, and most of the COVID paperwork problems are far behind us. So most dealerships are back to business as usual with respect to the paperwork. And the fact that Carvana couldn't get this straightened out at that location, I don't know what to tell you. I really don't. And so I've talked about this with my friends in the industry, both lawyers and people who sell cars for a living, and they all go, this is bizarre. This is bizarre because they could have brought somebody in and just said, straighten this out. And I know you're going to say, Steve, it's a high volume dealer. Maybe that's the problem. There are plenty of high volume dealers out there that have no trouble at all with the paperwork. None. And obviously, if this is an ongoing, thriving concern, it wouldn't have been that difficult for them to say, oh, let's go poach somebody from another dealer who knows how to do this and just bring them over here and straighten this stuff out. And if nothing else, it would have saved you that $10,000 fine and the turning in of your license. So it's kind of wild that this happened this way. I was expecting them to work out some kind of probationary agreement, but I believe they'd already done that once. So it's the old, fool me once thing, then fool me twice. So there you go. Carvana has turned in their license, paid a $10,000 fine, but said, hey, you want to buy a car? You can still do it. You can just do it virtually in Arizona. So Jamie LaRoe wrote that for the Free Press. Brian and Christopher both sent it. Thanks a lot. Carvana and Michigan reach a deal that leaves the used car megastore without a license at that location, but you can still buy a car, like I said, in Michigan from Arizona. Questions or comments, put them below. Let's talk to you later. Bye-bye.
Thank you for watching Lehto's Law. If you give a man a fish, he will eat for a day. If you teach a man to fish, he will sit in a canoe and drink beer all day.